years ago, I was the arrogant Saintess, and he was the dragon slave I whipped at my whim. 2 years later, he awakens the imperial dragon blood, replaced by a prince radiating golden light. But now, the tables had turned with a cruel irony. Disaster struck 3 days after Arthur's departure. My father, the Holy Father, was branded with a twin sins of treason and black magic, then cast into the darkest depths of the Abyss prison. But now, the tables had turned with a cruel irony. It had to kneel in the teeth of a blizzard, begging a shred of mercy. A dragon's roar shattered the clouds. Arthur emerged in human form, breaking through the mist.
Tell me, Miss Vivian, which hand was it? Which hand did you use to leave those scars on my body?
My knees buckled and I collapsed forward, falling directly into his arms.
Your Highness, please, save my father.
He laughed coldly, demanding I pleasure him to repay the debts of those 2 years.
To sever our contract. Holy Kingdom has no place beside my throne.
To tell him that I was carrying his children. I clutched my stomach where a faint dragon mark pulsed, beating rhythmically like a second heart.
Elena, is this how beg?
"2 years ago, I was the arrogant Saintess, and he was the dragon slave I whipped at my whim. 2 years later, he awakens the imperial dragon blood and returns to the imperial capital. As the giant dragon dives to the earth, he transforms into a king of extraordinary elegance. His dark gold dragon pupils are locked firmly onto me. Once his equal, now a disgraced slave of the clan, fallen into the abyss beneath the altar. To save my father, I was forced to kneel at his feet and let him tear away my white robes, the very symbol of my sanctity. He laughed coldly, demanding I pleasure him to repay the debts of those 2 years. He already has a perfect match by his side, yet he insists on taking me by force, trapping me in an eternal cage.
But I will never let your children become your prisoners.
Watching the madness of his possessive gaze, I pressed my hand against my stomach, where a faint draconic sigil flickered, the mark pulsing with the rhythmic cadence of a heartbeat. It was this very secret that had driven me almost to my own death, a scandalous escape that had shocked the world. A month ago, the Holy Kingdom fell under a sudden monster assault. I found myself cornered in the Black Forest, trapped and suffocating under the weight of a dark, malevolent curse as my consciousness began to fracture. He rode through chaos. As he charged forward on horseback, I could have sworn I saw the spectral shimmer of dragon wings unfurl behind him, a broken sword in one hand and a spear in the other, cutting a path to my side. In my blurred vision, he looked breathtaking. That night, amidst a frantic soul resonance, I let myself cross the forbidden line with him. I think I might have actually fallen for him. I thought of him the moment I opened my eyes. I banished him once more to the most remote, crumbling tower of the estate. Before sending him to the tower was a triumph of my power. Now I found myself sneaking toward it just to catch a glimpse of him. He was right there in my temple, yet I was dying of an incurable heartache. Today was his 22nd birthday. I had spent hours baking a lemon tart with my own hands, wanting to give him a surprise. I wanted to tell him that he was going to be a father.
Shadow.
2 years ago in the arena, I bestowed upon him the name Shadow. He was but a flicker of darkness, easily erased. Now, that name has become my only longing. I reached the tower only to find my world collapsing. My shadow was gone. A massive dragon shadow reared its head, its wings sweeping across the ceiling. A blinding burst of molten gold erupted before my eyes, before shrinking and condensing into the form of a noble man. The slave had vanished, replaced by a prince radiating golden light. The rumors followed quickly. He already had a fiancée, a childhood match, Lady Isabella, the most brilliant woman in the empire. As soon as he returned to the capital, their grand wedding would begin. My sanctuary had been transformed into a cage, surrounded by the cold steel of the paladins. The moment they spotted me, skulking in the shadows like a common thief, a royal guard lunged forward, pressing the frigid edge of a heavy greatsword against my throat.
Kneel, daughter of a traitor! How dare you stand in the presence of Prince Arthur?
I looked past the blade of the man in the center of the crowd. The ragged, homespun clothes were gone. In their place was a magnificent robe of black and gold. Risking execution, I reached out with trembling fingers, desperately trying to catch his hand. A low, rhythmic vibration hummed in the air as glowing embers of dragon fire drifted from the gold embroidery of his robes.
Are you truly the Crown Prince?
Tell me, Miss Vivian, how do you plan to torture me today? Will it be the jeweled whip, or shall I feel the weight of your dancing shoes again? Once I return to the capital, I will send the official documents to sever our contract. A woman from this wretched holy kingdom has no place beside my throne.
My eyes burned with unshed tears. I hadn't come to hurt him. I had come to celebrate his birth, to tell him that I was carrying his children. But even my touch was a stain to him now. I finally understood the brutal reality. He loathed me. He would never want me, and he would certainly never want the bastards in my womb, even if they carried his own dragon blood. I shielded the faint yet searing spark of dragon blood within me, standing amidst the hallowed ruins in utter despair. I wanted to tell him that I would give up everything. I would follow him to the capital as a lowly handmaid, anything just to stay by his side. But to him, my very touch was a defilement. The deposition decree, sealed with the dragon crest, had severed our contract forever. At 18, I had fallen from the adored Saintess to a prisoner abandoned by the gods. I finally woke up from the dream. Arthur hated me. He would go on to marry the pure-blooded Lady Isabella and father noble dragon heirs. To him...
Do you have any final prayers, Miss Vivian?
He looked down at me as if I were a speck of dust. I had wanted to beg him to taste the lemon tart I baked with my own hands. But seeing the frost in his eyes, I could only bite my lip and shake my head through a blur of tears. Golden scales erupted across his skin as the air ignited with his draconic aura. With a mocking sneer, his body shifted and expanded in a blinding flash of light, transforming into a massive dragon. The gale from his wings slamming me violently into the snow. He vanished into the clouds without a single backward glance. I sat frozen in the ice until a sharp, searing pain tore through my abdomen, nearly causing me to lose the child. Watching the fading silhouette in the sky, I clutched my stomach where a faint dragon mark pulsed, beating rhythmically like a second heart. Disaster struck 3 days after Arthur's departure. My father, the Holy Father, was branded with a twin sins of treason and black magic. Then cast into the darkest depths of the Abyss prison, I rushed to the capital, desperate and breathless, only to be met with a death sentence. He was to face the trial of Holy Fire on the night of the next full moon. Inside the stench-ridden dungeon, my mother's withered hand gripped mine with terrifying strength.
Elena, you must go to Prince Arthur. You must go to your shadow. You swore vows before the dragon god. You are High One only contract holder. He cannot simply watch us die!
Her words cut through me like acerated blood, but he couldn't find the voice to answer. How could I admit that during those 2 years of shadow, I had forced him into the freezing depths of the Holy Lake just to retrieve a lost jewel for my amusement? How could I confess that, in fits of rage, I had left scars upon his back that would never heal? He likely wanted to see my family reduced to ash more than anyone else in the world. But looking at the last flickering spark of hope in my mother's eyes, I forced myself to move. I picked up the ruby-encrusted whip, the very symbol of my former tyranny, and dragged my trembling body to the Crown Prince's palace. There, before the towering obsidian iron gates, I fell to my knees and waited. Back in the Holy Kingdom, a single command from my lips was enough to make Shadow crawl to my feet. If I wanted him to bow, he never dared to meet my eyes. But now, the tables had turned with a cruel irony. To see him for even a moment, I had to kneel in the teeth of a blizzard, begging a shred of mercy. I knelt until I lost all feeling in my legs, the ruby whip in my hands buried under a thick shroud of snow. Just as dawn threatened to break, a dragon's roar shattered the clouds. The black wings eclipsed the dawn as he dived, only to contract and transform the instant they struck the earth. From the heart of the erupting snow, Arthur emerged in human form, breaking through the mist. The crunch of his boots against the frozen ground echoed the frantic beating of my heart. His cold, indifferent gaze lingered for a moment on the whip I held.
Tell me, Miss Vivian, which hand was it? Which hand did you use to leave those scars on my body?
His voice held no warmth, only the crushing weight of a judge's sentence. I was so frozen I could barely breathe. Before I could find my voice, my strength failed me. My knees buckled and I collapsed forward, falling directly into his arms. His chest was burning hot, a searing contrast to the ice. The heat instantly triggered the memory of our Night of Soul resonance, the way he had pinned me against the altar of predatory hunger. My eyes welled with bitter tears.
Your Highness, please. Save my father. I'm begging you.
His pupils narrowed into golden vertical slits, and a faint rhythmic glow of molten fire pulsed beneath the skin of his throat.